Welcome to Dallas, the home of the killers. Welcome to Dallas, sharks and gorillas. The girls, they going harder than
Hola, ¿cómo estás? Estoy contento. Welcome back to another episode of Poofy Man Podcast. The Poofy Man Podcast, that is. Yes, indeedy. Season 2, episode 14. Welcome back. So, today we're going to talk a little bit about, the little time we have, we're going to talk about the controversy over these new AI-powered surveillance cameras called Flock cameras. So, if you're anything like me, you probably have no fucking clue what a Flock camera is. Neither did I. So, after digging a little bit, essentially these things are cameras. They're surveillance cameras. There's not a whole lot different about them other than they actually help in doing what the old non-Flock cameras couldn't do, at least at first glance. So these Flock cameras have been installed all over the country, and essentially they're AI powered in the sense that they have the ability to, like, I think they're not continuous motion, right? So they don't have the same problems that you'd have with blurring and, kind of processing images. They're motion activated. So really they were designed originally, I think, to basically clock, to hone in and clock the license plate numbers of individuals in cars. Basically were stored into like this national bank or registrar for all departments, law enforcement departments to, log into and cross-reference information when they're looking for suspects and high-index crimes and things like that. So at first glance, you're going like, what's the big fuss about? I mean, like, there's nothing different about this camera other than it shores up the inadequacies of the old cameras. However, as always, with new technology comes a set of new problems. So some of the controversy arises from the fact that at least in one county, I think, I want to say it was in Pasadena, somewhere out west, there were incidents where nearly 70% of the flagged cars were actually inaccurately pinned. So, imagine driving down, having a nice Sunday with your family or something, and having, an army of task force agents pull you over at gunpoint for no apparent reason. And apparently the pass-through percentage was 70%, was 30%. That's simply not high enough. That needs to go back to quality control. Somebody on the quality control fucking conveyor belt was playing on their phone or something, and they need to fix that if that's the case. So that's one problem. The other problem that arises, that seems to be most people's problem with it, is that it somehow betrays the trust between law enforcement and civilian in ways that are inappropriate, like your right to privacy and things like that. It's like, guys, your right to privacy has been obliterated it's so far gone. I'm surprised people even still try to mount this argument against anybody. Like, your right to privacy was thrown into the garbage and set on fire as soon as the Patriot Act was written into play. So, like, every single movement you make, your cell phone is probably your number one surveillance tool used against you. 90% of crimes, I'm sure, this is just a number I'm just throwing out, but I can imagine 90% of crimes are probably solved at some level because your phone puts you in a geolocation just by simply being on or off. It sends a ping off to a tower and then can be triangulated so long as they have another point at some point. using basic trigonometry. Of course, I never made it to trigonometry in high school, but I do now understand what it is. But anyways, so, if you're not, again, this seems like a silly argument or rebuttal, but like, if you're not really doing anything wrong, these things really shouldn't be a problem for you. In fact, you should probably be erring on the side of using flock cameras, of advocating for them, because all they do is actually, essentially do, again, what surveillance cameras have been failing to do for the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, how many times do we have a situation where there's a serious crime that takes place, takes somebody's kid from them forever, like a murder or something like that, that can't be solved for decades and decades and decades until a new technology rolls out. And, it's all because the surveillance cameras that were used that actually caught the crime taking place, being commissioned in live time, was so shitty that they couldn't identify anything. They couldn't identify anybody, or it rolled over at the wrong time, or whatever. So these flock cameras seem to at least right the wrongs of old cameras. However, there are also, I'll bring you back to another controversial issue. So it would seem that somewhere out west again, I want to say this was more like San Diego, so way out west. In San Diego, there was a case against a current colonel or a captain of the police force there, of the San Diego police force, that was charged, I guess, in a case where he was charged for stalking an ex-wife, using inappropriately logging into the flock camera system for no other purpose than to track his ex-wife's whereabouts. And again, like, not inappropriate use of the flock camera systems. I don't think that's what it's designed to do. But that really comes down to a simple solution of there should be one or two people in a department that actually have the authority to log into the flock camera's integrated system, rather than every single person with a fucking badge having the authority to do it. And so you'd basically, in lieu of a search warrant, you would have to get permission or authorization from a flock camera head, department head, to even access the system, or to sit while you're being sort of, monitored while you look into the flock camera and you do whatever actual serious police work you have to do, rather than just some random person being able to do it with a badge on. So that's really more like an internal issue that needs to be hashed out. But aside from that, if catching bad guys is the objective, flock cameras simply don't have any negative outcome from installing them that outweighs the positives in the pursuit of charging criminals with real crimes. And it's also something that, like, again, has just been around forever. It's just an optimized form of it. It's not it's not like Terminators out here, like, hunting you down because they don't like, the fact that you're driving a brand new car and they're jealous or something. It's not, there's no, like, there's no extra arm added to the two arms of the law that already fuck you all the time. This isn't a third coming or something. It's just an old, antiquated system that has now been upgraded. So there's this is like almost 50-50, which is strange. Some people feel like it's invasion of their privacy and all these other things based off of the controversies, and some people see it the way that I'm kind of seeing it, so at a cursory glance at least. So anyways, let me know what you think. Drop your comments. If you haven't subscribed, make sure to do it. We got an exciting show tomorrow. We got our first guest on. And I'm not even going to reveal who it is, but he's a good friend of mine, and he's a mainstay, a chief, a captain in the community. Fuck it, I'll just tell you. His name's Calvin Johnson. one of the greatest defense attorneys in the history of Dallas proper, will be here tomorrow. We're going to go over some of the questions that we've had over the last 2 seasons revolving around legality of things, and we're going to get a little background from him, and he has a very inspiring story, so very exciting. Make sure to tune in for that. So until then, we'll see you next episode. This is Poofy Man signing out.
Welcome to Dallas, the home of the killers. Welcome to Dallas, sharks and gorillas. The girls, they going harder than